Africa program at Chatham House, and I'm really pleased today to be welcoming back the Right Honourable Raila Odinga EGH, who's obviously the party leader of the Orange Democratic Movement. He's also the High Representative for Infrastructure and Development for the African Union. For Honourable Raila, Chatham House is a familiar location. This is the third time he's here. I was joking to him earlier, maybe it's third time lucky, we'll see. So, Honourable Raila is going to talk about Kenya's 2022 elections, priorities for unity and policy change. As you know, we had Mr. Ruto here last week, so Chatham House is looking at the Kenyan elections, and it's part of a series that we're doing. And we're very grateful to both the candidates, the key candidates that are running in the elections in August, to come to Chatham House and explain to us their vision for Kenya after these elections. This meeting is fully on the record. It is being live streamed. Please, if you've got your phones, put them on silent. If you'd like to tweet, we strongly encourage you to use hashtag #CHAfrica. And we'll make sure that there's an equitable Q&A session after the presentation, both from people who are here in the hall with us today, but also those who are with us globally who are live streaming. So I don't think I want to say anything more except, again, welcome back, Honourable.
Mr. Chairman, for that welcome, and also for the invitation to come back to Chatham House. As you rightly pointed out, it's not my first time to be here. I've had occasion to address the audience here before. I'm told that today we don't have the full house here because this meeting is being live streamed and a number of other people are watching online because of COVID situation. But I want to thank you once again for inviting me to this very historic institution where great ideas are openly discussed and contested among thought leaders, global statesmen, policymakers, and academics. I come here at a special time in my own political life. Just last week, I was nominated by the Azimio la Umoja, Kenya's largest political movement, as his candidate for the President of the Republic of Kenya. It is an honor and privilege for me to be entrusted with the opportunity, if Kenyans so decide on August 9th this year, to lead my country at a time of great suffering in the world. And that is why discussions such as these in a forum as important as this could not have come at a better time. So thank you once again. The world is going through very uncertain times. Notwithstanding the COVID-19 pandemic, we are currently faced with a crisis in Ukraine that is sending thousands of people into neighboring European countries as refugees. The Ukraine crisis, like the COVID-19, is a global phenomenon. The United Nations needs to urgently take leadership in finding a solution through diplomacy and dialogue already initiated in recent discussions in the Security Council. And Kenya has taken a very firm stand on this issue. In Kenya, we stand to lose about 10 billion Kenyan shillings worth of exports to Russia as a result of sanctions. That is about 100 million US dollars. We export coffee, tobacco, coffee, tea, spices, live trees, plants, bulbs, roots, cut flowers, edible fruits, nuts, and melons to both Russia and Ukraine. In 2020, we imported wheat, maize, and fertilizers worth about 406 million US dollars from Russia. This might be equally adversely affected by the sanctions and the disruptions of war at a time our economy can hardly afford such a stress. We in Kenya know too well the cost of war as a result of the conflicts in our neighboring countries. Our interventions in Somalia, necessary as it is, has been very expensive to us. It is estimated that we spend at least 2.8 million US dollars per personnel cost alone, on personnel cost alone. As the African Union High Representative for Infrastructure Development, I have come to deeply appreciate the need for linking countries through infrastructure to promote trade, development, and peace. We would rather use the little money we have in financing development than in fighting wars or supporting peacekeepers in our war-torn neighbors, necessary as this has become. As the 5th President of the Republic of Kenya, and as a champion of democratization and good governance in Africa, I will give primacy to the pursuit of conflict resolution and continental peace within the framework of the African Union. In this regard, we in East Africa are proud of the progress in the East African community, which has now expanded its membership and which now stands at 7. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is now the latest entrant. This now creates a landmass that spans from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean. In the middle of COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our economies, the world needs multilateralism more than ever before. We saw the need for multilateral track. The real scandal about the global response to COVID-19 has been the vaccine inequity, or what has been called vaccine apartheid. Because of the international outcry, these inequities are now being addressed. I want to personally express my appreciation for countries, especially the UK, Europe, and the US, for addressing vaccine shortages in Kenya and in Africa. However, we need a more structural solution to vaccine inequity to avoid the recurrence of what has happened with COVID. Vaccine manufacturing capacity in Africa is urgent, as is the licensing of vaccines for local production to expedite the vaccination process continentally. And here we're happy that Kenya has now signed an agreement to be able to have vaccines produced locally in Kenya. Multilateralism will also save us from senseless conflicts like the one we are currently witnessing between Russia and Ukraine. I must say that wars of aggression against sovereign states violate the cardinal principles of sovereignty and the inviolability of borders of a state. In Africa, we long realized that reopening grievances over colonial borders would append us all. It's a Pandora's box that must never be touched. And that is why the African Union, and before it, the Organization of African Unity, has stuck religiously to the international law principle of uti possidetis juris. It provides that newly formed sovereign states should retain the internal borders that their preceding dependent areas had before their independence. Kenya's position at the United Nations in full support of the immediate cessation of hostility by Russia and a search for common peace which has found widespread international support. Even though the sanctions imposed on Russia by the West will hurt the economic interests of Kenya and Africa, they are actions that I support. Rather than beat the drums of war, let us ring the bells of peace and summon all and sundry to the round table where all conflicts can be resolved through dialogue. It is in this spirit of dialogue that His Excellency President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and I resolved in March 2018 that Kenya's long-standing conflicts and disagreements among our communities and political parties could be resolved through dialogue. We held extensive discussions, looked into our history, the genesis and evolution of political disagreements, and the contradictions we needed to pay attention to. Then we shook hands publicly and announced our commitment to create a political system that would accommodate our social, ethnic, and political differences in an inclusive democratic process. This is what came to be known as the Building Bridges Initiative, or BBI. The initiative held public consultations and suggested various reforms with regard to public policy, the Constitution, elections, inclusivity in government, endemic corruption, and improving the general well-being of our people. The BBI is currently tied up in the Supreme Court, whose ruling we shall abide by. The spirit of dialogue and handshake continues in the Azimio la Umoja movement, on whose ticket I'm seeking to be the president. Azimio is a broad national democratic movement which puts premium on our national unity, inclusive development, and transparent and accountable use of public resources. I am convinced that our Constitution still needs some reforms. For example, a candid look at the relationship between Parliament and the Executive is urgent. The 2010 Constitution introduced a devolved system of government that has brought tremendous changes in the governance and distribution and the use of public resources at the grassroots. Devolution is here with us to stay. We can only make it better through higher allocation of the national budget to the counties. The Constitution stipulates that at least 15% of the budget should be allocated to the counties. We in Azimio la Umoja coalition propose that the allocation be raised to at least 35% of the national budget. I will pursue this proposal. I have always believed in the dictum that a central government does best when it governs least at the local level. Good. Article 43 of our Constitution guarantees Kenyans basic social and economic rights such as education, health, food, water, housing, and social security. I will purpose to implement this very important article. The COVID-19 pandemic has left our economy struggling. I intend to radically shift focus to supporting the micro, small, and medium enterprises and give them resources for scaling up and fill gaps emerging from the pandemic. I also plan to provide a supportive regulatory framework, including providing linkages with the formal and private sector and public sector so that the micro, small, and medium enterprises can thrive. I plan to increase the agricultural productivity by providing inputs to smallholders in addition to farm subsidies to farmers to enable us to produce for consumption and export. In the long term, a plan for the Azimio to prioritize an industrialization policy that is export-minded and that allows the private sector to drive the export agenda. I will support the private sector to lead a shift from exporting raw materials and agricultural produce and venture into industrial manufacturing with eyes on the international market. We will continue to expand the frontiers of quality public education and also pay more attention to skills-oriented education at the basic level to prepare students for productive work when they do not pursue higher professions at college and above. The current government has done a great job with regard to universal health coverage. My government will take up from where the Jubilee government has reached and eliminate the difference in terms of quality and cost between the public and private health facilities. Universal access must be universal access in word and in deed. I intend to improve health knowledge and awareness among our people so that family, community, and preventive health care are part of our healthcare infrastructure. I also intend to establish an institute for biotechnology and genetic engineering in Kenya so as to enhance our domestic capacity to develop vaccines and pharmaceuticals. Social protection will be central in the delivery of social services to the poor and indigent under my government. I told our citizens that our major reason, I hope that one major reason that I hope to be their leader is to help lift the extreme poor and vulnerable families so that they can access the basics and later support themselves. We will also mount serious war on corruption and unveil fundamental reforms to the structure of our economy. Much has been said about Kenya's indebtedness. Kenya is now approaching US $100 billion in public debt. This puts Kenya in the group of the most indebted, debt-stressed middle and lower-income developing countries, now being forced into IMF credit and IMF-supervised austerity programs. Such austerity programs are usually implemented in the sole interest of satisfying the debt repayment at the expense of people's livelihoods. You have no choice in the matter. We will have to seek the indulgence and cooperation of our development partners to renegotiate our debt. I will also audit our debt to establish its actual size. We acknowledge that even our troubles with the debt are in the part caused by corruption, kleptocracy, and a state capture. We will mount a serious war on corruption. Corruption, as it manifests today, is a global phenomenon. We need a new global partnership around this critical issue. Although the tax burden on Kenyans is now unbearable, I will make sure Kenya does not default on debt repayment. In future, we will strive to borrow at a favorable interest rate, negotiate repayment periods that are not stressful, and invest in enterprises that give good social and economic returns. Finally, Kenya is committed to rolling back global warming through drastic reduction of greenhouse gas emissions particularly at the industrial and corporate level, in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. As Kenya's Prime Minister in the year 2008 to 2013, I was at the forefront in the struggle to save our water towers, expand afforestation, and increase large-scale production of green energy by increased investment in geothermal, solar, and wind power. My government will move systematically to replace fossil fuels with green energy in production and transportation, generally. We have done what we could do to save and preserve our water towers in the country, because this came at a political price that we said we were ready to pay so that we can be able to protect our environment. I am continue to be committed to ensuring that Kenya contributes its part in this global undertaking to make our environment much more safe for future generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Raila Odinga, for laying out your vision for Kenya if you get elected president in August. We have plenty of time for Q&A, so the hands are already going up. Just a reminder to those of you that are live streaming with us, if you're on Zoom, you can indicate that you want to ask a question. Either send your question in, and we'll also try and unmute a few of you to give you that opportunity to ask the question live. My apologies if you are on our live stream and not on the Zoom platform, you're not going to be able to ask a question, but I hope you're enjoying what you're seeing, and do tweet if you want to. So let me go across the room now, and the hands are up. So I'll take a cluster of questions. Honourable Raila, the gentleman there. Yep, you sir, please introduce yourself and ask your question. Just one question, please, because we're going to get plenty.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Raila Odinga. My name is Fred. I teach political science at King's College London. And
who you are?
My name is Fred. I teach political science at King's College London. And my question is regard to your program for the middle class in Kenya, because your opponent, William Ruto, has this bottom-up approach about the poor. You also have this welfare program for the poor, but nobody's talking about the middle class in Kenya who have to pay the taxation to take care for this program. So what exactly are you going to do for the Kenyan middle class in terms of improving their welfare? Thank you.
Okay. Don't worry, we're going through the room. You, sir? Yeah.
Afternoon. My name is Julius Baluto. I'm a broadcast journalist here in the UK. Prime Minister, my question focuses on the youth and the future of... Julius Baluto.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question focuses on the youth in Kenya and the future. Prime Minister, a lot of developing countries, they do have what we call innovation hubs scattered across, whereby if a child has a brilliant idea, they take it there, and then government kind of supports that to keep innovating. I know Kenya is very innovative. With the M-Pesa, for example, is taken, money transfer to the next level in Kenya. What are your programs like when it comes to help youth in terms of innovation?
Thank you very much. And let's get right over, but one question, please. Yes? Guaranteed?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. Nice to see you again.
Thank you, Right Honourable. Welcome back to London. My question is regards to your agenda.
Also.
My name is Wekesa. I also teach at King's College London. My question regards with your agenda point number 10, and that's you speak about administrative continuity, and you've touched on corruption. Your brother, President Kenyatta, admittedly that he couldn't do anything about corruption. And you've been at the forefront of condemning corruption from saying Kenyatta stole the Eurobond. I wonder, what will your government do if you're going to continue with the same administrative in terms of fighting the same corruption with regards to the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers, the Kemsa COVID billionaires? Like, what's different are you going to do? And does administrative continuity mean also inheriting the lethargic fight against corruption? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to take those three and then we'll come back. So I'll do another round in the hall and then I'll go for a live stream after that and then I'll come back to you. Please go ahead.
This one is about, Fred talked about the plans that we have for the middle class. Of course, as you see, there's been a lot of emphasis on the underprivileged class, which is the poor. The middle class, of course, know very well how to look after themselves. But they are not people who are looking for the very basic requirements like basic shelter, food on the table, and so on. Middle class are looking for example, affordable housing in terms of shelter. They're looking for good schools for their children, which is affordable, the lowering cost of living generally, ensuring that food is basically available and reasonable. The cost of energy, which is affect the middle class. Those are things that we intend to address, making sure that the transport system is working in urban environment and also basically urban transport is working properly. I mentioned the cost of energy and so on. So those are issues that we are actually addressing in our manifesto comprehensively, which will ensure that the middle class grows. We want to grow the middle class. What we have said is that you don't deprive those who have in order to empower the poor. And like the emphasis has been made in what they call the bottoms-up approach. We are saying that we create a conducive environment for upward social mobility to allow as many people coming to rise up and join the middle class and even the upper classes. This is what we're intending to do. The youth innovation, yes, our youth are very vibrant and very creative indeed. You just mentioned the example of the M-Pesa. We are the ones who invented the mobile money, which we've given to the world. Unfortunately, the inventor himself did not really benefit from the product of his work. We've said that you need to be able to protect intellectual property of the youth. They make inventions, they are protected so that they can be able to benefit from what comes out of their work. That itself will create a lot of incentives to promote the youth to be more creative in inventions in our country. Okay. This is, intellectual property. See, Mr. Kesa, I've said yes, that we will continue the positive work that have been done by the government of President Uhuru Kenyatta. I've never said that we are going to inherit the negative things. There are certain negative things that Uhuru himself has actually admitted. He said that, for example, the government loses close to 2 billion shillings daily into corruption. He is, of course, felt very much unable to deal with it. The reason is because he's got a divided government. Is being undermined from within his own government by his deputy, who's basically an opposition inside the government. And therefore, any fight against corruption is politicized. If anybody is investigated by investigative authorities and is arrested or being charged, there's always this cry that, oh, so-and-so is being targeted because he's my supporter. So-and-so is being because he's my supporter. So they cannot really fight against this corruption internally because of internal contradictions within the Jubilee government itself. I do not have that kind of baggage myself. I'm coming in there with clean hands, and people know me. Remember when I was Prime Minister, at the time when I actually suspended 2 ministers because of investigations which had been carried out and pointed to those ministers. Unfortunately, because of, at that time, the internal divisions, the government, they were saved by my partner at that time. But we've said that nobody will be indispensable in the government. And if you want to really carry out a successful war against corruption, then you just begin yourself. If any member of your family is caught in this, you must ensure that action is taken against them. I give an example of Kagame, whose own brother was arrested and imprisoned, and he would go to visit his brother in prison and just tell him, sorry, but this is where you belong. You know, if you take those kind of actions, then people will begin to know that it is not business as usual. It must be business as usual to dealing with this hydra-headed animal called corruption. And there will be a determination to do it. But it is not only in the field of public servants and so on. In the whole criminal justice system, investigative authorities themselves sometimes need to be investigated. Prosecutorial authorities who refuse to prosecute once evidence has been compiled by those who are investigating, then you find that the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, prosecution, refuse to actually prosecute, take them to court. The third is the end of it, till end, the judiciary. People are being charged. Once they're taken to court, you've got a battery of all these lawyers baying in the court, oh, these people are basically innocent until proved guilty through a due process, and make it impossible even for the judiciary to work. But those are corrupt judiciary. They give bail or bond, and then the cases are never listed for hearing. Years on, cases which were taken to court at the beginning of the life of this regime in 2018 have not been heard up to today. So a corrupt judiciary is also responsible for what we're doing. So it's not only the members of the public generally, but we will ensure that we do a cleaning exercise from the police officers through the prosecution authorities and to the judiciary to ensure that our system works properly in the interest of our people. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go over here. Is it you, Fergus? Yeah, this. Yep. So, yep. Mark, go ahead. Yep. Please introduce yourself. Some people won't know who you are.
Mark Malloch-Brown, former Africa Minister and President of the Open Society Foundations. Honourable Raila, it probably won't surprise you that I'm going to ask about how you ensure there is an honest election. Having been with you as Africa Minister in 2008 when we feel you were cheated at the right outcome, having seen the dismal conduct of the last election in terms of the vote count, how will you ensure when you're running against a well-funded, ruthless partner, how will you make sure that the honest election takes place, which allows the candidate with the most votes to win?
Thank you very much. How will you ensure that that you will win in a fair way, given the complexities of Kenyan politics? We've had so many questions on this particular issue. Both my WhatsApp and the computer's full of them. There is another question tied to this also, Honourable Raila, which came up last week with Mr. Ruto, who said he would accept an election result. So the question to you is, will you accept an election result in Kenya? Let's go here, this gentleman right at the front.
Thank you very much. My name is Moses Langat. I work at Kew Gardens and also teach at the University of Surrey in Guildford.
Can you just speak up a bit, please? Yep.
Yeah, so my name is Moses Langat, and I work at Kew Gardens and also teach at the University of Surrey in Guildford. My question is around the handshake. The Right Honourable Prime Minister has said that he dialogued with the President and they shook hands. We know what happened in Kenya. That meant that the opposition collapsed. Members of the Parliament from the opposition took positions in the ruling government. Literally, we ended up with another government of national unity. So my question to the Prime Minister is, are we expecting another handshake in 2023? Will there be a third government of national unity? And by extension, what are you teaching, or what is Kenya teaching opposition leaders in Africa? Thank you.
Okay. And the final one is the lady there. Please go ahead. It's been gentlemen up to now, so absolutely your turn.
Thank you. My name is Karen Juguna. I am a midwife here in the UK. I trained and practiced here. Yeah. My question is around maternal health. So you talked about constitution reform, and I'm interested to know what your government has or plans are in terms of reducing maternal mortality. As you know, reducing maternal mortality is a global agenda. And we commend Beyond Zero for the work that they've done in almost bringing to the front the plight of the African women through childbirth. So, and we know that at the moment in Kenya, unsafe abortion contributes to 35% of maternal mortality. So I'm interested to find out how you will build on the work that has been done by Beyond Zero, but in particular, do you have any reforms in terms of having policies, looking at the policies around abortion? They're very much pro-life at the moment, but I think that we cannot address maternal mortality in Kenya without addressing unsafe abortions and the complications that come from that.
There you go. Plenty of questions.
To answer my friend of the Brown, how do I ensure the win? He knows how me and him have been agonized, particularly in 2007, when what was not expected to happen happened. It has been a long road, as you know. Following the 2007 Bush elections, because Kenya has paid a very heavy price in terms of loss of life that resulted. And we had said that never again will that happen. Unfortunately, the subsequent experiences have not been very much different. We set up a team at that time, the Kriegler Commission, to investigate what happened. And they came up and said that one of the reasons was the manual transmission of results, which enabled the people to interfere with the outcome. and recommended that Kenyans should go electronic. Unfortunately, the results with this have not been very pleasant. Remember what happened in 2013, and we contested the outcome at that time. We went to the Supreme Court, unlike in 2007, when we did not have confidence in the Supreme Court. At this time, we went, but then because we did not get evidence in time, by the time we were able to compile our evidence, we said that we were time-barred, and therefore our evidence was dismissed. And then the Supreme Court went on to say we lost elections. And we said we did not agree with the Supreme Court ruling, but we generally accepted because we respected the Supreme Court and urged our supporters not to involve in any kind of violence or demonstrations. So we then resigned ourselves to our role as an opposition and waited for the next time. And then the next time came in 2017. Again, we had a similar experience and went back again to the Supreme Court. This time the Supreme Court agreed with us and nullified the presidential elections. Unfortunately, the Electoral Commission was not able to guarantee that the repeat elections were going to be different from the other ones. That's why we boycotted the repeat elections that time. We are hoping that this will not happen this time around, but we are, of course, monitoring the Electoral Commission, and we have actually pointed out areas of our concern that we want them to address to ensure that the process is free and fair. And we have actually said that if this is free and fair, and we win or we lose fairly, we will accept the result either way, so long as it's free and fair. Then Moses is talking about that the handshake basically destroyed the opposition. I just want it to be understood properly, that the handshake came as a result of the crisis that was in the country at that time. The Supreme Court had nullified the elections. We had demanded that the playing field be leveled before we participated. That was not done. In the end, of course, we called for a boycott of the repeat, and the turnout was, of course, very low. But then they went on to now swear the president on its own, which angered our people. We called for boycotts of certain products in the country. We also called for positive action, that is demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations, which were taking place on a weekly basis. This, of course, was causing clashes between our support, and a lot of lives were being lost. There was a time when we went to a place called Ligindogo with 38 coffins of victims of bullet shots by the police. Another time we went to the mortuary and we got 27 corpses, again victims of the police brutality. Quite a number of our people were in hospitals, in different hospitals in the country with bullet wounds. So it was causing a lot of losses of lives, pain, and also to the economy, because the demonstrations were basically disrupting the business. Now some of our people have said we basically declare our sovereignty and run our affairs. In the midst of this, because people, we had accessed the real results of the elections, we did the swearing in. And so now you are the president and the people's president. And people said, let us now take all the portraits of President Kenyatta in all the public buildings, in our strongholds, keep them somewhere, touch them, and declare our sovereignty and begin to collect taxes and run our affairs. On the other hand, the supporters of Mr. Kenyatta went and told him what Mr. Odinga has done is treason. Let's arrest him, charge him with treason, take him to committee, and hang him so that peace comes back to the country. Both ways, Mr. Kenyatta refused, and I also refused. It is under those circumstances that we agreed to meet and to dialogue. And it took a very long time until we basically agreed that Kenya was bigger and more important to both of us. And we agreed that we would work together to ensure that never again will Kenyans go to the ballot and we end up with violence like has been the case before. And that will ensure that the elections are free and fair. And we agreed to shake hands and came up with a memorandum of understanding that was aimed at creating the enabling environment. That is what eventually resulted in what was called the Building Bridges Initiative in our country. So opposition did not collapse, to answer you. We did not go into government, unlike the propaganda being spread by our detractors. We remained very much in opposition. Our party in parliament was doing what is done in this country, what you call Her Majesty's loyal opposition, where you do not just propose for the sake of opposing, but oppose and also offer a constructive alternative as what you're opposing. This is what has been happening in Kenya. There have been fallacious theories that, oh, you've got opposition in government and government in opposition. Nothing could be further from the truth, because that so-called government in opposition is living in officialdom. The deputy president, when he came to this country and the United States, he spent over $1 million US dollars in taxpayers' money to bring that entourage out here. He's traveling with the government security. Everything is done for him officially. I have to pay my airfare to come here. And with all the people you see who have come here, none of them has been paid for by the government. Unlike him, he traveled with the official government, security, and so on and so forth. So it cannot be an opposition, a government in opposition. I don't know if that kind of term exists anywhere. Finally, Caroline, yes, maternal mortality. This is an issue of serious concern to us. Accompanied here by Madam Charity Ngilu, who has been a Minister for Health and came up with a policy to address this particular issue and other issues of health concerns. That we have said that we are going to improve healthcare generally in the country by ensuring that the facilities are available and closer to the people, and that they are brought up to real international standards, so that you've got facilities which are manned by qualified staff, and the equipment and everything else is available in those centers. So this will help to minimize maternal mortality in the country. The antenatal care and so all this will be provided for through this kind of scheme. And you talked about the safe abortion. As you know, that this was a very contentious issue during the debate of our new constitution. But our constitution had provided that in cases where the life of the mother is threatened, then the doctors are actually entitled and allowed to terminate the pregnancy. And just like general maternal mortality rate, this will be done as in the centers that we are intending to provide. We're closer to the people so that we can save life and minimize death through pregnancy. Thank you.
So I'm now going to go for some of our virtual audience, and then we'll have one more round from you here in the hall, and then we'll finish, I think, the way the clock is going. So the first question is one, Honourable Raila, I'm going to read out, which is from Dr. Saleh, and he says that he assumes policy change includes foreign policy, and he's asking, could you please comment on your stance towards democratization and good governance in Africa in light of coups in Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea? And what do you think is the role that the African Union and IGAD should play? He also asks, what's your vision for the East Africa Federation, which is a question that was asked to Mr. Ruto last week also. So that's one question. A second question is from Madalena. I think we're going to be able to allow her to ask the question live. She's in Rome. Is that correct, Fergus? Are we going to have Madalena?
Yeah.
Yeah, Madalena, great. Please introduce
hi
yourself, ask your question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. I'm Maddalena Procopio. I work for ENI Energy Company. I'm based in Rome. Honourable Raila, you mentioned the importance of for Africa of accepting borders, and I was wondering, how do you see the maritime dispute, border dispute with Somalia to play out? The International Court of Justice ruled mostly in favour of Somalia, but Kenya did not really accept the ruling. What next? Thank you.
Thank you, Madalena. At this stage, I want to just introduce you all to our Common Futures conversations. So our next questions will be from two young members of Chatham House's Common Futures Conversations project. For your information, Honourable Raila, the Common Futures Conversations project is a centenary initiative of Chatham House using a bespoke online platform to provide space for young people in Africa and Europe to share perspectives on key global issues and engage with policy makers. We've received a large number of questions on a range of issues for today, and in the interests of time, we've selected two who will pose the questions directly to you via Zoom. But with your permission, I just want to read out one of the questions because I think there's some technical difficulty, and we'll invite the second to ask the question live. So the first question is Brian Audi. And Brian's question is, Kenya is one of the countries that has been greatly affected by climate change. We can see the effects of frequent droughts and floods all over the country. What are your plans to fight climate change in the run-up to COP27 and beyond? So that's one question. And then the second question is from Mikiel Nyamweya. So Mikiel, we're going to ask you to ask your question live. So Mikiel, please ask your question.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Mikhail Nyamoya, and I'm a foreign policy analyst and a CFC member based in Nairobi. Now, my question directed at Right Honourable Raila Odinga relates to foreign policy, and it is said that foreign policy is an extension of domestic policy. Now, we see that foreign policy under His Excellency, the President Uhuru Kenyatta, has been seen to be assertive and pragmatic during his tenure as president. Now, in the previous event held by Chatham House, His Excellency, the Deputy President William Ruto, actually pointed out on galvanizing peace amongst Kenya's neighbors, especially Somalia, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. This may now hint at the fact that he may have a more, regional outlook. Now, in this case, knowing very well that foreign policy changes with change in heads of state due to personality, what is your foreign policy agenda? Will you sustain the assertiveness displayed by Kenya's foreign policy over the last 8 years in your capacity as the individual actor in foreign policy that is, or is the same likely to undergo a sharp reversal? Thank you.
Thank you, Mikhail. So 2 foreign policy questions, basically, and 1 on climate change also.
Mr. Salah talked about African democratization process. We have ourselves have been involved in this democratization process on the continent. As I said at another forum earlier today, that I'm a Pan-Africanist and an Afro-optimist. And I say this as opposed to Afro-pessimists. Afro-optimists are those who believe in the ability of African people to solve African problems. Afro-pessimists are those who have given up on the continent, that Africa is a lost case. There's not even need to try. Now, the African democratization process has been as old as Africa has been independent. There have always been 2 forces in pulling in 2 opposite directions. In the 60s and in the 70s, of course, following the African independence, the 2 schools of thought are arisen. Those who are talking of Pan-Africanism and African unity were led by then Kwame Nkrumah. And those who say that Africa can only develop if it was united. They're talking about United States of Africa. Then those who say, no, you need to be gradual about it. The gradualists first talk about regional cooperation, regional integration before you come to Pan-African government. That is how the OAU at that time was divided. In the end, those gradualists succeeded. But later on, if you read what Mwalimu Nyerere said just before his death, he said Nkrumah was right and they were wrong. Because once the people had the flag and had now started to consolidate power, the urge for unity disappeared. And it has become more and more difficult to unite at that time. Now, during the Cold War, of course, the West was very happy to protect African dictatorships. The issues of internal governance was not of priority at all. So long as you say that you are an ally of the West in the war against communism, nobody cared how you ran your affairs in your own country. That's how we created the dictatorships like Mobutu Sese Seko's, Kamuzu Banda in Malawi, Bokassa, Del Bokassa of Central African Republic, and so on. Military coups then became order of the day in the continent. It was not only after the fall of the Berlin Wall that the window of change began, that started in Eastern Europe, also found its way into the African continent. And that's what brought down the military regimes and the single-party dictatorships on the continent. Multipartyism then emerged on the continent of Africa. Now the West began to apply new criteria, new vocabulary were invented, transparency, accountability, and good governance in the internal affairs. So multipartyism came, and military regimes went away. Then term limits were also introduced into new constitutions which were being created on the continent. This has seen market growth on the continent, whereas before this, most African economies were basically dependent on aid, which continue to impoverish the continent. The new governance changed things, and we began to see positive rate of growth on the continent. Unfortunately, we are seeing some kind of reversals of the gains that have been made on the continent. The last few months or years have seen the emergence of the military men on the continent. Just last year alone, we saw coup in Mali, in Guinea, in Chad, in Burkina Faso. Of course, it's a concern to Pan-Africanists like ourselves that there's a reversal. Now, what will be the cause of this? Maybe those who have taken over, who have been in charge, have not been governing very well. Some of them we've seen revising the constitutions to do away with term limits, which had been created in the days of the reforms. So we need to do an introspection as to the causes of this reversion that we are seeing on the continent, and we hope that it is reversible. About my position, that first we believe in East Africa, East African community, as founded by the founding fathers of our independence. But they actually envisioned not just a community, but a federation. Mwalimu Nyerere, Mzee Kenyatta, Jaramogi, and Obote are talking of East African Federation. I will want us to work towards creating a federation where we can remove the borders so that there can be free flow of people and goods across our borders. This will make the community a very vibrant economy on the African continent, because now the DRC has joined. You are talking about over 300 million people population with a lot of resources. So that's what I would say about the community. Madalena, Kenya-Somali border. Yes, this is a contentious issue. Kenya and Somali, are neighbors, and we enjoyed good neighborly relationship until the turmoil in Somalia started. We have not had a stable regime in Somalia for over 30 years today. This is really the cause of the crisis we are having, because we cannot really negotiate equitably with the regime that does not even have proper legitimacy. That issue of the border between Kenya and Somalia does not need to be contentious. It is an issue that does not even need to go to international courts of justice. It can be dealt with within the context of either East Africa or the African Union, and a amicable solution can actually be found to that problem. So I intend to pursue that option and find a peaceful solution to that dispute between us and Somalia. The climate change, yes, this is a big challenge, not just to Kenya, but not only to Africa, but globally. Africa, of course, is more of a victim than the offender in this regard, because our emissions are very negligible compared to the big offenders in Europe and in Asia. But we have a role to play ourselves, and we are playing this role very effectively. We've seen, for example, our policy on plastic waste, the issue of conservation of the environment in terms of our water towers, afforestation measures that we are taking, going green in terms of energy generation, because right now we are really trying to go the geothermal, solar, and wind. So we are almost nearly 80% there in this regard. So we will do everything possible to ensure that we are not in the league of offenders. Michael, our foreign policy first is to create a very friendly relationship with first our neighbors and cooperation within the East African community. Then to also play our role in the African Union. At the moment, as you know, I am the African Union High Representative on Infrastructural Development. That has given me an opportunity to move across the continent and establish contact with leadership around the entire continent of Africa. We want to create a friendly relationship among the African countries. We, of course, will not be neutral when it comes to aggression and violation of national integrity or sovereignty. Like, as you know, Kenya has been very firm at the UN Security Council on the issue of Ukraine. The invasion by Russia on Ukraine stand condemned by Kenya and most of the peaceful international community. That is where we are. So we will not be mentioning words on issues where violation of fundamental human rights are concerned, irrespective of where it is happening. We will be taking very firm stand, generally. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, you are. So what I'm going to do is just two questions, because we're on time. We haven't had anyone from this side of the room. So gentleman there, yeah, you, sir. And this extreme side of the room here, there's not many of you sitting, but do any of you want to ask a question? This is your chance. No? Patrick Smith, you don't want to ask anything? But anyway, please go here first.
Sean Curtin, Chatham House member. What is your attitude towards Kenya's debt to China, which is quite considerable? You have mentioned Pan-Africanism a lot, and that Chinese debt is definitely a Pan-Africanism problem. Thank you.
What was your name? Sorry, Honourable.
It was Sean Curtin.
Sean, okay. No questions there? Doesn't matter then. The gentleman right here in the front is the last question. Yeah. It's coming. The microphone's coming. Okay. Just one question, please.
Yeah, my name is Abdul Mohammed. I'm a local London politician, British politician, and I'm a member of the diaspora. What I wanted to ask was that last year the diaspora, something like about $3.7 billion to Kenya, and is forming a substantial part of the economy of Kenya. Yeah. And the diaspora hasn't felt very included in the programs that the government is running. And as a member of the diaspora, I feel that the diaspora members would want the Kenyan government to be more involved with the diaspora to encourage us, because we've got not only the money but also the talent. And I wanted to find out what ideas you've got in getting that talent much more involved in the battle against poverty and upraising the standards of living in our country, in the country.
Right. So those are two questions. I have one for you myself, but I'll ask it right at the end. Please, Honourable Raila, if you answer those two questions.
First, Sean, about the Chinese debt. I think I got you right. This is the question is always asked about China and China's intentions. And I say that it's really not China, it is those who are negotiating with China. Because for a long time, it was very difficult for African countries to undertake certain major infrastructural development because of lack of capital. And when at that time they were all just dependent on the West, particularly Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, and bilateral donors at that time. Most of African countries were not able to undertake major infrastructural development like highways, ports, airports, irrigation schemes, and so on. So China came in to actually fill a vacuum that was there. And obviously, of course, China is not doing it out of charity. China is also interested in Africa's raw materials, generally. So they came to fill this vacuum. And now it really depends on how the country negotiates, because they're not applying a blanket solution or terms across the continent. It depends on how you negotiate with the Chinese. If you don't have strong, tough negotiators, they will, of course, impose the terms on you. If you are desperate, beggars cannot be choosers, as they say. So in my view is that African government must actually negotiate favorable terms with the Chinese. And if you're uncomfortable with some of the terms, you renegotiate. Put it back on the table and renegotiate. Or find somebody else who can be able to buy out the Chinese, in my view. So I don't think that China is the elephant in the room here. I think it's wrongly put there where they don't belong. Abdul Hamid, there's the diaspora. I agree very strongly that diaspora is making a very strong contribution to Kenya's economy through remittances back home, which helps our foreign exchange reserves. I have been very much involved in trying to respond to the request of the diaspora. I remember when we started with the diaspora, I was talking about dual citizenship, which was not allowed. We pushed it against a lot of opposition and got it into the constitution that you can have your British citizenship here, but you can still also retain Kenyan citizenship. That, I think, was a major achievement. And we are also now trying to see that diaspora can invest in the country and that the investment will be protected. You know, like we're talking right now, for example, about massive housing development. And we want to create a situation where the diaspora can invest in housing while they stay wherever they're staying. And we actually intend to now set up a desk in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that is just going to be dealing with diaspora matters, so that if the issues were concerned can be addressed effectively and fast enough for the diaspora. And if they want to invest in the country also, they are given proper information as to where the opportunities are, where they can invest back in the country. We want to enable Kenyans to just do like what they do in Israel. You see, the Israeli Americans, or whether they are here in this country, they can invest in Israel at very favorable terms. I see no reason why we cannot do that with our own diaspora back at home, because it is the investment that we require. It does not hurt anything else. It helps our economy, and therefore we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Raila. I had just one final question. You have an important meeting this evening. You're going to the Emirates Stadium to watch Liverpool play Arsenal, or Arsenal-Liverpool. What's going to be the score?
This is the last question, of course.
It is.
As you know, I started first as a Man U fan here, but I need to explain. And it was not until the time when the Man U fans had a problem. Remember, because of violence, that they were banned by FIFA, and Man U was playing in empty stadia for 1 year. That's when I migrated briefly to Liverpool, and then eventually found my way to Arsenal. So I'm an Arsene Wenger Arsenalian, Arsene Wenger Arsenalian. So, and we are the only ones who produce the Invincibles. So tonight we have Liverpool against Arsenal. I know that Liverpool are really trailing very closely the leader, the Man City. But tonight I'm predicting at least 2 goals for Arsenal.
Okay.
I don't know how many for Liverpool. Thank you.
You heard the prediction first at Chatham House. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and good evening. The next meeting we have here that might be of interest to you is the Secretary General of the African Free Continental Trade Area, and that will be on the 30th of this month. Information will be sent out shortly. Thank you very much.